Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our Wednesday morning weekly Tanya Shir. Today is Wednesday, February 18th, Rosh Chodesh Adar, the first day of Adar. Mishenichnas Adar Marbim B'Simcha. May Hashem bless us all with an abundance of Simcha, and everything should bring us Simcha, and only Simcha in our lives, beginning today. And Marbim B'Simcha means every day gets stronger and stronger, so it should only get bigger and better and stronger from here, with Hashem's help. There we go. We are studying the 7th chapter of Tanya. If you have the English Tanya in front of you, in the new print, I'm starting at the top of page 116, which I believe in the old print would be page 114, by the words V'hi bechina mimutzas. So as we started learning last week, in Perek Zayin, the Alter Rebbe will talk about two types of klipa, two types of, let's call it, spiritual forces of negativity or darkness. One is referred to as Sholosh Klipas Hatmeyes, the other one is referred to as Klipas Noiga. And the difference, again, as we spoke at great length, and will continue to speak at great length, is that Sholosh Klipas Hatmeyes are, generally speaking, they are rejected from having any revealed or open connection to Hashem. They've been cast aside. These are all things that are forbidden to eat, things that are forbidden to do, things that are forbidden to say, things that are forbidden to think. Anything associated with the 365 negative mitzvahs in the Torah, or any of the negative rabbinic mitzvahs, or anything that a Jew is not supposed to do, etc. These are generally do, think, speak, say, associated with, etc. These are, generally speaking, associated with Sholosh Klipas Hatmeyes. Sholosh Klipas Hatmeyes, the expression is, this has a lot to say about this expression, but the expression is Shvirosan Zuhi Takonosan, which on a simple level means there's no way to elevate this to holiness, there's no way to there's no way to perfect it, there's no way to rectify it, there's no way to be mavarer it, nothing. In the end, like Amalek, if you will, it's something that just simply needs to be destroyed. That doesn't mean to say that there isn't a tremendous amount of avoida involved. Doesn't mean to say there isn't a tremendous amount of struggle and work and investment that goes in. There is, of course, but in the end, the avoida is not to work with it, but the end, the avoida is to destroy it, is to push it, destroy it. Or at the very least, if it's not possible to destroy, or etc., at the very least, to have absolutely nothing to do with it at all. That is Sholosh Klipas Hatmeyes. Klipas Noiga, on the other hand, very different. Klipas Noiga is something that, number one, we cannot avoid. Everything that we engage with that isn't in a revealed way, the studying of Torah, the fulfillment of mitzvahs, is Klipas Noiga. It's not something we're supposed to stay away from. It's not something we're supposed to stay away from. It's not something we can stay away from. Eating, drinking, sleeping, working, all of the, every interaction in general, again, other than the actual study of Torah, fulfillment of mitzvahs, all falls into the category of Klipas Noiga. Why is it called Klipa? There's nothing wrong with it per se. It's called Klipa because it's not openly, it's not explicitly. By definition, it's not necessarily the service of Hashem. So it's service of Hashem. In other words, it's not studying Torah or the fulfillment of a mitzvah. That's why it's called Klipa. Why is it called Klipas Noiga? Klipas Noiga means radiant Klipa because it's a couple of reasons. Number one, it has certain positive qualities, right? Like we learned by a Jew whose nefesh abhamis comes from Klipas Noiga. A Jew is by nature bashful, a Jew is by nature merciful, etc. And more importantly, as far as this parak is concerned, the reason why it's called Klipas Noiga is because it always has the ability to be elevated to holiness. It can be used for holiness. Even if it's, a table, a chair, food, breakfast, if the person does so with the intent of engaging with it in order for the sake of serving Hashem, then not only is it permissible, right? Not only is it l'chaim. On that note, we'll drink a cup of coffee as to help give us koyach to study Hashem's Torah. in that sense, not only is it permissible, right, permissible to engage in this because it's for the sake of service of Hashem, but more than that, the Alter Rebbe says, by definition, klipas noiga doesn't remain in the level of klipas noiga ever. It either when a Jew engages with it, it's going to go one way or the other by definition. If they use it for the sake of, if they don't use it for the sake of Hashem, then it gets lower to the realm of shalosh klipas hatmeis. If the Jew uses it for the sake of the service of Hashem, then by definition it gets elevated to kedusha. This is what's explained here. The idea being that we draw, the Alter Rebbe is drawing the lines for the battleground here between the Nefesh Elokis and the Nefesh Abamis, so that we understand exactly what it is that we're dealing with here. The Nefesh Elokis is going to, number one, not want ever, is going to do its best to prevail upon the person not to ever associate with Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis, ever. And every engagement, any encounter that it does have with Klipas Noiga is always going to be exclusively, specifically, for the sake of serving Hashem. Right, Rabbi Mendel Futefas said very famously that he was taken. He was very deeply affected the day he learned, and actually I believe watched in action, a tightrope walker, because he watched the tightrope walker walk back and forth on this tightrope, and he was very taken by it. It was really a tremendous skill. And as a Yid who always spoke about what he learned in Avodas, in the service of Hashem, what he learned from this individual, what he learned from watching him was that the way he was able to do this was he concentrated his mind and his entire being, directed all of his energy toward the point of his destination. And because he was so fixed on it, because he was so fixated on his point of destination, so even though his arms and his legs were flailing in all different directions, he never fell, because he was able to keep himself centered by focusing, by concentrating on this point of destination. So that's, again, a relatively simple concept to understand. The idea is that the Nefesh Elokis wants a Jew to live with a true north. The true north is that we're here in this world, Ani lo nivresi, ela l'shamash eskoini, for a reason, for a divine mission, for a purpose, and we stay focused on it to the exclusion of everything else. So whatever facilitates that, whatever brings us forward, whatever carries us to that purpose, to that ideal, we engage in. We engage in, as much as it is valuable to carry us there. Whatever is not, whatever is a distraction, simply is non-existent. It doesn't even get registered on our radar. And this is the way a Yid engages with all matters of the world, and in the process, not just abstaining from Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis, but engaging with Klipas Noiga and elevating it to Kedusha. Again, I'm going from the top of the page, where it says, V'hi bechina memutzas. V'hi bechina memutzas, says the Alter Rebbe, this level of Klipas Noiga is sort of an intermediary world. Bein Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis legamrei, or bein bechinas hakdusha. It is in bein bechinas madregas hakdusha. It's in between. It's like a twilight zone. On the one hand, you have Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis. They're actually a place of spiritual darkness. On the other hand, you have the realm of kedusha, and in between you have Klipas Noiga. V'lochein pa'amim shi nechleles v'shalosh Klipas Hatmeis. Because it's in between, Klipas Noiga actually can, at least temporarily, descend to the level of Shalosh Klipas Hatmeis. K'mosh Beitz Chaim, Shamim Tesreish Peragdal B'Shem Azariah quotes an Eitz Chaim. He quotes from the Arizal. Upa'amim, sometimes she nechlelos v'oile b'bechinas madreigas hakdusha. Sometimes Klipas Noiga can be elevated to kedusha. What does it depend on? It depends on how it's used. What does that mean? Sometimes it can be elevated to kedusha. For example, if a person eats fat beef V'shoyse yayin mavusam, or drinks very flavored wine, but he does so laharchiv daita. He does so to broaden, to open his mind, laHashem, to Hashem, ula toirosai, and for his Torah, in order to be able to study Torah with an open mind. Kidoma Rava, as Rava taught in the Gemara, cham rava, wine and fragrance pikchin, open a person's mind, make a person more receptive. Oy b'shvil kedei lakayim mitzvahs oinek Shabbos v'Yom Tov, or another reason why it would be in service of Hashem, to eat meat, to eat fat beef, quote, or to drink delicious wine, for the sake of being makayim the mitzvah of oinek Shabbos and Yom Tov, where there's a mitzvah to derive physical pleasure on Shabbos and Yom Tov. One of the ways to do that is through eating good food. Azai, so then when he does so, the divine energy inside this meat and inside this wine that came from klipas noiga is elevated. Hashem, it goes up to Hashem. Like a burnt sacrifice, like a korban. Where you take an animal and you elevate it to Hashem. So you can take these things from klipas noiga and elevate them to kedusha. Or a person who says, milsa de bedichos is usually understood as a joke. A person will say a joke, right? If it's not an inappropriate joke, is under normal circumstances would be in the category of klipas noiga, right? There's nothing inherently wrong with it. It's just a joke. Now, if you're supposed to be studying Torah, and instead of studying Torah you are joking around, then you are engaged in bittul Torah. Then the joke would be kshalosh klipos atmeis. But what about the Gemara says that Rava would say before he would teach the Talmidim, before he would teach his students, he would say a milsa de bedichos. He would say something of humorous nature. Why did he do so? Lefakeach daito, in order to open the mind, ulesameach liboy, and to gladden to make the heart happy. LaHashem uletorasei, directed again to the Rebbeinu Shlom Tzei B'Shtarnes Torah v'Avodah shetzrichem liyos b'simcha, where a person must serve Hashem, but it's critical that the person serve Hashem b'simcha. Uchmoish asa Rava l'talmidav, as the Gemara says, Rava did for his students, where he would tell them this joke. At the beginning of every shir, you would say something humorous, something, that would catch them off guard, something witty, something sharp. But the Gemara says that the rabbis would actually laugh. But he did so not, God forbid, just for the sake of wasting time. He did so not God forbid, because he was trying to entertain them for the sake of entertainment. He did so not because he wanted to just, he wasn't trying to cheapen the experience. The opposite. He used this, kind of like an hors d'oeuvre, right? He used this as something to get the juices in the minds and the hearts of the Talmidim flowing, to open their minds, to whet their appetite, that they should be inspired to learn, that they should be intrigued. As a means to an end. So for the sake, as a means to an end, something like a joke, which would be klipas noiga at best, could be used for the sake of kedusha, just like you can eat meat. In order to open your mind to study Torah, you can eat meat in Shabbos v'Yom Tov and fulfill a mitzvah this way. So too, you can say something, you could tell a story, a vort, or even a joke, and the purpose of it is not, God forbid, as a distraction, but the purpose of it is to facilitate, to open the minds of the Torah students, so that they will learn and they will study on a deeper level. Okay. Actually, again, I know I'm repeating myself, but this is at least on the surface, this is actually a relatively simple and straightforward concept to understand. The idea that a person lives with a sense of purpose, there is a mission, there's a sense of direction, and everything has to lead toward this, have to go in this direction. So this is right. This is the way a Jew is supposed to live. It goes hand in hand with the concept of hashgacha pratis, where the idea is that everything we encounter in this world is in order to bring us one step closer, to give us the opportunities to fulfill our shlichus in this world, as we know. Okay. Weiter. Let's go a little further. However, the same act of eating meat or drinking wine, which can be done for the sake of serving Hashem, mitzvahs onek Shabbos v'yom tov, or to open one's mind to study, the same act of eating meat and drinking wine can be shalosh klipas atmeis. Mishu bezoyle lebasar. If a person is eating out of gluttony, v'soiva yayin, or drinking wine just for the sake of lamalas taivas gufay, to fulfill the lustings, to engage, to indulge in the desire of one's body. V'nafshe abamis, so there's animal soul. Shu b'chinas yisoid hamayim, you learned at the beginning of Tanya, everything Hashem created consists of eish, ruach, mayim, and ofar, air, water, fire, and earth. So the water element in the nefesh abamis is lusting, is taiva, is temptation. It's called yisoid hamayim, which means the nefesh abamis has, ultimately the nefesh abamis has an insatiable appetite. So if the purpose of the eating of the meat or the drinking of the wine is just to engage in the appetite of the nefesh habahamis, just in order to enjoy it physically, just in order to indulge in one's gluttonous tendencies, the attribute of taiva, the attribute of appetite for pleasure comes from this element of water, yisoid hamayim, of the nefesh habamis. So even though you'll argue, well, he hasn't done anything wrong, right? He hasn't hurt. He didn't hurt anybody. He didn't offend anybody, etc., etc. Nevertheless, if he eats meat and drinks wine for no other purpose other than lemalas tavosei, other than just to fill a need, an appetite for pleasure. So then what happens is this same life force in the meat and the wine that could have been elevated to Kedusha descends spiritually. The energy in the meat and in the wine descends to shalosh klipos hatmeis, because again, for a Jew to engage in something, anything, not explicitly and openly for the sake of serving Hashem, is shalosh klipos hatmeis, is something which is completely gufa, and the person's body becomes a tool and a garment for shalosh klipos hatmeis. Because he's engaged in something which is not for the sake of the service of Hashem. Lefisha, temporarily. Until the person does tshuva. Until the person does tshuva and returns to the service of Hashem and His Torah. Then when he does so, everything gets elevated back to Kedusha. Since the meat that he ate was permissible, he didn't eat treif chas v'shalom. The meat that he ate was kosher. V'yayin kosher, and the wine that he drank was kosher. So therefore, it wasn't a sin just by virtue of what he ate. That's not what made it a sin. What made it a sin, what made it shalosh klipas hatmeis, was that it was not for the sake of the service of Hashem. Therefore, when the person does tshuva, so then he, that is the Yid himself, and the energy in the food and drink that he consumed, when he does tshuva, it all gets elevated back to Kedusha. Very interesting. The Rebbe says, when we say something is permissible, we say that it is mutter. Mutter means permissible, or heter is an expression in halacha. Right? People ask for a heter, people ask for something mutter. Simply, it means permissible. But the translation of the word heter or mutter, says the Alter Rebbe, koloimar is, what's the actual translation of the word? She'eno kosher means that it's untied. Lahatir, it's actually one of the 39 malachas on Shabbos, right? Is to undo a knot. HaKosher v'hamatir, to make a knot and to undo a knot. Heter, mutter means something is not tied. It's untied. What does that mean? It's not tied. Not tied to what? Says the Alter Rebbe, it's not tied b'deach yitzayim. It's not tied, meaning when we say that something is permissible, we mean that it's klipas noiga. What's the definition of klipas noiga? That it's not inherently, it's not rooted, it's not bound necessarily in the hands of klipa, it's untied. It has the potential, number one, it has the potential to be elevated to kedusha. And even if it was used, chas v'sholem, not for the sake of service of Hashem, in which case it descended into the world of sholosh klipas atmeis, says the Alter Rebbe, it's temporary. Because it remains, inherently, it remains something which is untied, uncommitted. Therefore, as soon as the person does tshuva, it gets elevated back. It gets elevated up to kedusha. It's not something which is tied down to klipa, which would disenable its ability to go back to serve Hashem. As soon as the person does tshuva, it can always be elevated. As soon as the person does tshuva, it can always be elevated, and therefore, this is the reason in halacha why it's called. This is the reason according to Chassidus why in halacha it's called something which is mutter. The opposite, when we say something is forbidden, we say it is osur. Osur also means osur. The opposite of mutter. Osur means forbidden, but osur also means that something is tied. When you say when a person is in loyalenu, may Hashem protect us. When a person is in prison, we say they're in beis hasoihar, or the person is in osur. The person is in prison. The person is tied up against their will. Osur means it's tied. Mutter means it's untied. When it's tied into the hands of klipa against its will, when something is tied in the hands of klipa, meaning it cannot be elevated to holiness, that's something which is forbidden for a Jew, then it's osur. When something is permissible, then it's even if it was lowered to the realm of shalosh klipas atmeis, through tshuva the person can elevate it. Okay. Now already over here, there's an unspoken question, which is, what do you mean? Tshuva only works for things which are mutter. Tshuva doesn't work for things which are asur. Tshuva works for everything, right? So this question the Alter Rebbe will deal with in a few lines. We'll learn about it next week in Mitzvah Shem. But for now, we'll leave it at this. This is what Alter Rebbe is saying. That when something is mutter, even if it's used not for the sake of service of Hashem, since inherently it remains something permissible, the tshuva can elevate it back to kedusha immediately. Whereas for something which is also, there's a different process. Rak, says the Alter Rebbe, however, before we go to that which is also, Rak sharashimu mimen, even something which is mutter, Rak sharashimu men nishabaguf. If a person eats, even permissible foods, but he eats them not for the sake of serving Hashem, so it descends into shalosh klipas atmeis. So we just said, with tshuva you can elevate it immediately. It's true, says the Alter Rebbe, you can, but even if you do tshuva and elevate it to kedusha immediately, there's a reshima. A reshima means there's a trace. A trace remains in the body. Therefore, later on in Perek Ches, the next Perek, the Alter Rebbe will talk about something called chibut hakever. Chibut hakever is a process that the Jew goes through after 120, which refines and purifies the body from anything it may have engaged in this world, derived benefit, derived pleasure from in this world, not for the explicit, not for the revealed immediate sake of serving Hashem. So even if the chayis, even if the spiritual energy gets elevated back to holiness, but the body, which derived pleasure from it, not for the sake of the service of Hashem, needs a certain type of purification process called chibut hakever, which we'll learn about in the next parak in Mitzvah Shem in Perek Ches. Another example, the Alter Rebbe will give, same idea, this concept of klipas noiga, going temporarily or permanent, but they're going temporarily, klipas noiga, going temporarily to shalosh klipas atmeis, applies in intimacy between a husband and a wife. If a person if his wife is tahira, she's pure, meaning they are halachically permissible to engage in intimacy, and they do so. But the kavonas, the intention of the man, the mind frame, the place where the man is psychologically, he's Alter Rebbe calls it taiva bahamis. Taiva bahamis means he's engaging just in animal-like lust. Shloi kiddush atzmoi b'shas tashmish. And he didn't, in the moment, he didn't sanctify himself. He didn't elevate himself. He wasn't in the right frame of mind. He wasn't thinking that this is for the sake of the mitzvah. He wasn't thinking that this is for the sake of the intimacy with his wife. He wasn't thinking that this is an opportunity. Chazal say, Ish v'isha zochu shchina shruya beinehem. When they merit, the word zochu means when they are also means when they are refined. Right? When they are refined, Hashem's presence rests there. He wasn't in the right place. So the chayas, the energy, shebatipa zera, in the drops of semen, shiyotzim and betayvamis, that emerged from him in this taiva bahamis, in this moment of animalistic lust, it's klipas noiga, right? Meaning to say this is something which is permissible, but it's not being done for the sake of serving Hashem. So since it's not being done for the sake of serving Hashem, this is the simple understanding of what's written here. The Alter Rebbe is saying this is another example, where at least temporarily the chayas of this descends to shalosh klipas hatmeis. Now again, like we said before, once the person does tshuva, it can be elevated from shalosh klipas, because inherently this is something permissible. It can be elevated from shalosh klipas hatmeis and be elevated to kedusha. But at least temporarily, the person has taken something, an opportunity, chayas, that could be used for the sake of serving Hashem, that could be used to make one a keli, to make one a vessel, to receive, to become closer to Hashem, right? To become holier and more elevated, and instead use this opportunity to engage, again, in the words of the Alter Rebbe, b'taiva bahamis, animalistic lust. So temporarily they've lowered themselves to the realm of shalosh klipas hatmeis until the person does teshuva. And then again, like the Alter Rebbe said before, even after teshuva, the body after 120 still requires some form of purification process. Okay, this is klipas noiga. When it comes to forbidden foods, forbidden relationships, forbidden intimate relationships. Shehein misholosh klipos hatmeyes lagamrei. They are taka. This is takos. This is shayfa food. This is a relationship which is actually forbidden. Hemasurim ukshurim b'dei hachitzonim la'olam. So now, the energy here, the divine energy here, is tied. It's osir. It's forbidden, meaning it's tied down to the forces of klipa forever. The ein oile mishom, and it never leaves. Ad ki yava yoimim v'yiboila hamavis l'vibula hamavis l'netzach, until Mashiach comes. Moshe Kosev es ruach hatum ma'avrim min aretz. We'll stop over here. And so when Mashiach comes, the spirit of impurity will be removed from the world, and then everything, then the whole world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, etc., etc., and everything will be holiness, and everything will be openly and revealed connection to Hashem, etc. But this is what the Alter Rebbe says, until the coming of Mashiach, there's no way to work with shalosh klipas hatmeyos. There's nothing that can be done. But therefore, macholes asur is forbidden foods, bias asur is forbidden relationships. One who has engaged, one who has sinned, of course, the person has to do teshuva, but the teshuva, as a rule, again, is not going to help. The teshuva will help, let's say, from now on, right? The teshuva will help the person, will elevate the person, but as far as the chayas, as far as the experience, as far as the energy in the treif of food or in the forbidden relationship, Alter Rebbe says, there's nothing you can do. Hashem said no. Bottom line, you did something that Hashem said no. You did something that Hashem said no. So that remains tied down to shalosh klipas hatmeyos until the coming of Mashiach. Okay, next week, in Mirz Hashem, we're going to learn that there's something called tshuva me'ava. Tshuva me'ava is a higher level of tshuva, and tshuva me'ava works even to remove things, divine energy, from shalosh klipas hatmeyos. Right? But that's like a whole other cheshbon. That's a whole other story. That's a ma'aseh. We'll learn about that in Mirz Hashem next week. But for now, what's written here is that the difference between Sholosh Klipas Hatmeis and Klipas Noiga is that Sholosh Klipas Hatmeis, number one, could be used for Kedusha. Klipas Noiga could be used for Kedusha, Sholosh Klipas Hatmeis can't. And number two, Klipas Noiga, even if it was used for the wrong reason, because inherently it's something mutter, something permissible. So therefore, if you do tshuva, you elevate it. Even if it was lachat, even if in the first place the person engaged with it for the wrong reason. You do tshuva, you elevate it. Whereas with Sholosh Klipas Hatmeis, there's no option, at least on the surface, there's no option to elevate this to Kedusha. Okay. Right, I'm going to take just a couple of minutes and scratch the surface here a little bit on one of these ideas, because there's a depth here that needs to be explored, that needs to be thought through. It needs to be thought through very, very deeply. Let's start the conversation. We're talking here about klipa, right? Klipa. Should translated usually as forces of darkness, forces of negativity, etc. Granted. Now, that is in Yiddishkeit, we don't believe that anything else has independent power other than Hashem. Everything which exists only because Hashem created it, and nothing has independent power other than power that Hashem gave it. B'chlal and Torah. Chassidus, in general, takes this whole idea to the next level, because Chassidus insists that nothing else exists other than Hashem. So what in heaven's name is going on here with this business of klipa? What's the pshat? It doesn't exist outside of Hashem. It doesn't exist because nothing exists outside of Hashem. There is nothing other than Hashem. So what do we mean when we say klipa? We mean again, forces of darkness, usually translated, forces of darkness, forces of negativity, forces that oppose Hashem. The best example that I once heard, I don't know if this example is brought in Chassidus, but it's an example in my head nevertheless. The best example that's brought for this, imagine you're having a dream, right? It's an unpleasant, not you. Imagine a person having a dream. It's an unpleasant dream, right? In the dream, they are fighting with somebody. In the dream, they're fighting with somebody. And they're fighting and they're wrestling and they're, in one's dream, they're all anxious and they're worked up and your heart is pounding and you're a person is experiencing fear in their dream that the person they're struggling with in their dream is going to hurt them. Right? So what's going on? Okay, so the mind is doing whatever it is that the mind is doing. Fine, I'm not after the psychology of it right now. But what's the truth? The truth is that it's all taking place in one's own imagination. Right? So if somebody has a dream that somebody, Rahman al-Islam, pulls a gun on them in their dream, and somebody has a dream that somebody is shooting them in their dream at point blank rage, right? With an Uzi or with a band gun or straight to the head, v'mazakt. And in the dream you hear, not you, but the person hears some kind of explosion, bam! All right, so what usually happens then is that you wake up. But it's clear, right, that the bullet, the gun in the dream is not, in the dream that the person has, is not going to kill them. because there is no gun and there is no bullet. But more than that, but because the whole thing is taking place inside the person's own imagination. It's all part of the dream. It's a mashal that sometimes Chassidus teachers use to speak about the concept of klipa, and there's wisdom there. In other words, there's nothing else here other than the person. The person can't really be in danger from this gun. This gun, number one, doesn't exist. And number two, even if it does, it just exists inside the person's own realm. It exists inside the person's own world. It can't destroy the world in which it exists, right? Just like a gun can't shoot itself. So when we say, in a similar sense, when we say the Eibishter created Klippa, which he did, clearly they were talking about, and different types, right? Klippas Noiga and Sholosh Klippas Atmeis, etc. It's not like there's anything here other than Hashem. It's all within a world. It's all within the realm of godliness. And yet we're still talking about Klippa, and we're still saying that there's Klippas Noiga that could be elevated to Kedusha, and Klippa that can't be elevated to Kedusha until Mashiach comes. So again, let's scratch the surface here a little bit. What do we even mean when we say Klippa? We don't mean something else other than Hashem. There is nothing else other than Hashem. So let's go back to the Moshel. So like in the Moshel, the person having a dream, what we mean is, what's happening, right? With the person, it's true that there's nothing else outside of the person when they're having a dream, because it's all taking place inside the person's dream. Granted. But the person, let's say while they're dreaming, doesn't feel that. The person feels, they're experiencing it as if some of the sensations are very similar, right? Their heart can be beating. They can be experiencing similar sensations of fear as if there was actually something to be afraid of. They're experiencing it as if there really is something. So this is what we mean when we talk about Klippa. We talk about Klippa, we talk about how the Eibishter Hashem creates this mirage, if you will, or this sort of sensation, as if there's a realm and a world that's outside of Hashem. As if there is, as if there is a world in which one can oppose godliness. There isn't really. It's just there, created as if. Now, the next question that people always ask is why? Why did Hashem create it? Okay, good question. I don't know that we know the full answer to that, but we understand a little bit of the answer for that. The answer is Hashem wanted something called b'chira, Hashem wanted something called struggle, etc., etc. Okay. So when it comes to Klippas Noiga, we say Hashem created it. Hashem created this world in which, so the definition, in other words, the definition of Klippa is not a world which is truly opposed to godliness. It's just a world, a realm, a reality which seems to be opposed to godliness. Granted. So then, if that's the case, then what's really the difference between Klippas Noiga and Sholosh Klippas Atmeis? Inherently, what's the difference? It's not as if Sholosh Klippas Atmeis truly is outside the camp. There is nothing outside the camp. There is no outside the camp of godliness. So what's the difference? So Chassidus actually redefines it for us a little bit, right? There's a very famous story about this, which I'll tell you in a second, which you all know. It brings out the point. But Chassidus says, no, Chassidus says, we're misunderstanding here. It's not the pshat that Klippas Noiga could be used to serve Hashem and Sholosh Klippas Atmeis can't be. That's not the vort. They both could be used to serve Hashem. Everything has to. Otherwise, it wouldn't exist. If there was no way to use it for the sake of service of Hashem, if it didn't in any way facilitate godliness, it wouldn't be able to exist. So what does it mean? So Chassidus quotes the Ferrat. So there's a Moshel in the Zohar from this. There's which Talter will actually reference a little later. There's a very famous concept. But the idea is not that this is not for the sake of service of Hashem. Rather, the idea is that in this case, we serve Hashem by not engaging. Just like Hashem created certain things that we serve Hashem through engaging with them, Hashem created other things that the intention is that one can serve Hashem by not engaging with them. It's a very famous story. One of the Chassidish Rebbes, I forgot which one it was, maybe the Sigurd, one of the Chassidish Rebbes, not Chabad. So he would go every Friday to the mikveh, like all good Chassidish Rebbes do. And he would go with his shamash. His shamash would take him, and his shamash would, and they would go to the mikveh. So one Friday he's going to the mikveh, and instead of going to the mikveh, he takes a different turn, and he walks into the most affluent, wealthy neighborhood in town. And he walks, into the richest block and walks up to the richest house and knocks on the door. Anyways, a butler comes to the door, a doorman comes to the door, takes a look, a Chassidish Rebbe, wearing a vice board and payas and a black hat. Can I help you, Rabbi? Doesn't say anything. The Chassidish Rebbe doesn't say anything. The shamash is standing right there. The doorman turns to the shamash. Can I help you? The doorman, the Gabbai just shrugs. The Gabbai has less an idea of what the Rebbe is doing there than the doorman does. No clue. The Rebbe didn't tell the Gabbai anything. Good, so they go. They call the balabos. They call the owner of the house. The owner of the house is Jewish. A very not a Jew who lives a lifestyle that's authentic, that's true to his neshama in any way, shape, or form. Not a religious Jew at all. But he knows, what rabbis are and how the business works. He takes a look. Chassidish Rebbe comes to his house. He says, Rebbe, step into my office. Yitzhak brings the Rebbe into his office, sits down, offers the Rebbe a cup of coffee. No, thank you. Something to eat? No, thank you. For the Gabbai, something, a cup of water? Nothing. He says to Rebbe, no, how can I help? The Chassidish Rebbe doesn't say a word. Nothing. Sits there for a minute. Maybe the rabbi needs a minute. Maybe he's, upset about something. Not one word. Kitzer, the balabos stands up, right? I'll be right with you, Rabbi. He stands up, calls the Gabbai, okay, come here. What's the rabbi want? The Gabbai says, to tell you the truth, I have no idea. I don't know. This wasn't on the itinerary for today. Anyways, to cut a long story short, the balabos pulls out his checkbook, can I offer a donation, this? The Chassidish Rebbe doesn't say a word. He sits there for 5 minutes, stands up and walks out. Goes to the mikveh and goes about his business. He comes home, and as he's about to walk into his house, the wealthy man is waiting for him outside his house. He goes, Rabbi, what did you come to my house for? The rabbi ignores him. Excuse me. He says, Rabbi, you obviously came to my house for a reason. You obviously want something. What do you want? The rabbi ignores him. The wealthy man gets upset. He goes, Rabbi, what are you doing? The Chassidish Rebbe says, okay, I'll tell you. He says, listen. The Chassidish Rebbe says to him, listen. Never mess with Chassidish Rebbes. He says, listen to me. The Gemara says that just like there's a mitzvah to tell somebody something when you know they're going to listen, there's a mitzvah not to say something when you know the person won't listen. Tishem shemitzvah loymar dvorim anishmoim, kach mitzvah shaloi loymar dvorim sheinam nishmoim. Dvorim sheinam nishmoim, something that people won't listen, a mitzvah not to say. The Chassidish Rebbe says, I have something to tell you that you're not going to listen. So because you're not going to listen, I have a mitzvah to not tell you. He says, by us Chassidim, we like to fulfill mitzvahs behidur. He said, I figured if I sit at home and I don't tell you, how are you going to know that I have something to tell you that I'm not telling you? That's not the Mahuda way of fulfilling the mitzvah. I have to sit in your office and not tell you, then I'll do the mitzvah behidur. So I did that. On the way to the mikveh, I stopped off. I said, Rebbe, what is it? He says, I can't tell you. If I tell you, I lose my mitzvah. He says, but now you made me curious. He says, that's a you problem, not me, And he starts walking into his house. He goes, Rebbe, you're messing with my head. Reverse psychology, Hasidic style. Come on, tell me. The Rebbe says, no, I'm not telling you. I'm telling you. Right now I have a mitzvah that I fulfilled behidur. You want me to give it away? He says, but you obviously want something from me. He says, I'll tell you what I want to fulfill the mitzvah of not telling you. Gets said they're arguing back and forth, and the guy is getting worked up. The Chassidish Rebbe is working him. He's raising him on, it's called. He's winding him up. Eventually the guy says, Rebbe, what's it going to take for you to tell me? He says, what's it going to take? It's going to take me not giving away my mitzvah. If you promise you'll listen, then I'll tell you, because then I don't lose my mitzvah. Then it's dvarim anishmon, then I can tell you. He says, how can I promise I'll listen? He says, of course not. In fact, I can almost promise you won't listen. Have a good Shabbos. All right, Rebbe, I promise I'll listen. The Rebbe says to him, you're the bank manager, yes? Yes. He says, a woman came to me the other day. She's loyalenu, may Hashem protect us. She's an almona. She's a widow. A bunch of young children at home. Your bank is about to foreclose on her house. Oh, yes, he says to Rebbe, I know exactly what you're talking about. They owe a lot of money on that house. They haven't paid the mortgage in years. I'm sure, says the Rebbe. But there's no achnosa, there's no money. The woman is in an almana. She's got a bunch of little kids. She's about to lose her house. She's going to be homeless. The Chassidish Rebbe says, she came to me the other day and she cried her heart out to me about this. And I thought to myself, why, Ribono Shel Olam, why would you do this? Why would you send a woman to me crying her heart out over the fact that she's about to lose her house? What am I going to, what can I do? Pay her mortgage? I can barely survive my own. Tore my heart out, the Rebbe says. And then I remembered that you're the bank manager. And you're a Yid. And I thought, how could a Yid, every Yid beteva, by nature, is bashful and merciful, Rachmanim b'nei Rachmanim. How can you not have Rachmanis? How can you, a bank manager, throw a woman out of her house, an almona, and you saw him on the street? On the streets! Surely, as a Yid with a neshama, with a soul, you'd never do such a thing, ever! I decided I have to talk to you. But then I remembered, you're stone-hearted, cold-hearted, indifferent to the plight of your brothers and sisters, the Jews who are suffering. You don't care. I remembered what kind of a person you are, and I realized talking to you is not going to help at all. The only thing I could think of why Hashem gave me this is to fulfill the mitzvah of not telling you. So I did. I went to your house and fulfilled the mitzvah of not telling you. But now you promised to listen, so you got to save the woman's house. He goes, Rebbe, I don't own the bank. I'm just the bank manager. He says, I know. And that was part of why I wasn't going to tell you anything. But now that you promised, you have to help. Good Shabbos. Rebbe, what do you want me to do? I don't want to hear, as the Rebbe says. Not a word. You promised? You may be a cold-hearted, indifferent, piece of garbage. But even you are a man of your word. You have to fulfill it. And, with that, he gave him some Chassidish Rebbe tough love, and that was the end of it. And of course, the bank manager found a way, as they do when they have to save the woman's house and to save the plight of this particular family. What I love about the story is that it highlights this point exactly. Just like there's a mitzvah to say things that will be heard, there's a mitzvah not to say things that won't be heard. The difference between Klipas Noiga and Shalosh Klipas Atmeis is not that some can be used for the sake of service of Hashem, some not. The difference is just how. You see, my friends, everything that we go through, that we experience, that we touch in this life is all part of the neshama's journey. Some things we learn from. What to be like. Some things we learn not to be like. Some things we engage with, some things we don't. Sometimes the mitzvah, the way of serving Hashem, is to use it. Sometimes the way of serving Hashem is not to use it. I want to finish with this. Chassidus says, this is the deeper meaning of the expression, Shvirosan Zuhi Takonosan. Shvirosan Zuhi Takonosan simply means, there's nothing you can do with it. Nothing you can do with it. Only thing you can do, just break, Shalosh Klipas Atmeis, break it, smash it. Chassidus says, that's not what it says. Shvirosan Zuhi Takonosan means, when you smash it, meaning when you don't engage in the Shalosh Klipas Atmeis, Zuhi Takanosa. That's its takana. That's how it reaches its function in serving Hashem, by being avoided. Right? The Zohar has the famous mashal of the melech who hires a woman to tempt his son. Not because he wants his son to fail, because he wants his son to overcome the test. That means in this case, the way of the son overcoming the challenge is by not engaging. We'll have all sorts of different things that will come our way in life. Some things we're supposed to engage with, some things we're not. Right? May God grant us the wisdom to know the difference. It's not that some are used for the sake of serving of Hashem and some are not. A Jew serves Hashem every waking moment of every single day, and even while he or she is asleep. It's just that with the Alter Rebbe is saying, it's just Chassidus is here to teach us, but how? But what? Everything a person needs to know. A person needs to know their shlichus. A person needs to know their shlichus. Right, the Rebbe said, finish with this. The Rebbe said once at the end of the Farbrengen, that he's asking everybody to give money, to contribute towards something. And they should write it down on a card and hand it in, and they should sing a niggun. So a few minutes later on the recording, the Rebbe said that he noticed a very interesting thing. That he said that he told the Chassidim to give money and to sing a niggun. So the Rebbe said that he noticed that the yeshiva bochrim got very excited about giving money. They were all writing, they were all filling in the cards about how much money they're giving. And the balabatim are all singing the niggun with a tremendous chayas. The Rebbe said, it's the Yetzer Hara. Right? This is the Yetzer Hara at work. Well, the Yetzer Hara at work. They're singing a niggun and giving tzedakah. What's the Yetzer Hara at work? Because it's the wrong shlichus. The yeshiva bochrim are supposed to be singing the niggun with a chayas. They're supposed to be pumped up about the niggun. And the balabatim are supposed to be giving tzedakah with a chayas. Instead, what happens? The yeshiva bochrim gets farkocht about the tzedakah, and the balabatim get excited about the niggun. Not correct. The Rebbe called it neshamas hatoyos, neshamas that get lost along the way. They engage in the wrong type of mission. So every person needs to know, we're all tightrope walkers. Every person needs to know what is our point of destination. And everything along the way, positive or negative, is there as part of the journey, as part of the mission of serving Hashem. Chassidus empowers us every step of the way to know how to engage with it correctly. Have a wonderful week. Again, Mishenichnas Adar Marben B'Simcha, Gott Chodesh, so Zayin Ba'al Yidin Brachas and Simchas, and we will continue Be'ezus Hashem next week.